what were the largest insights that we took away while we were going through this? The first of them is what we probably thought of as the most surprising insight, which was that this application avalanche that a lot of us are experiencing, in some cases, can provide a bit of a subtle life raft in a moment of spending a lot less on recruiting. So let me explain what I mean by that. A lot of you have flagged for us that you have massively larger volumes of applications coming in for every role than you've ever had at any time in the past. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all applicable. Actually, in a lot of cases, they aren't. There are dozens of reasons for this, that this has happened. We have a full study on this if you're interested. But you can kind of think of it as two main categories of drivers. One is that the last decade and a half has been defined by removal of barriers to application from university recruiting programs. We've gotten rid of GPA, we've gotten rid of schools in a lot of cases, we've gotten rid of degree requirements, and also we've made it easier to apply. Click to apply, not having to write essays, whatever it is. Second is that AI tools can now enable candidates to auto-apply to as many jobs as they want that meet certain criteria. That doesn't affect all members, but that can really spike applications for some members. Most view this application avalanche as a negative, and in a lot of cases it is. It can overburden recruiters, and most members don't have auto-rank or auto-score on right now, so there's no systematic way to get through this. I will note, as a side note, that those who do have auto-rank or auto-score on and have gotten approval for that have found it just to be a knife through butter when it comes to application avalanches. However, in this moment, when people are being asked to cut so much, some members have realized they actually don't need to do much outbound because they're going to get so much inbound as well. So the first insight that we had is that some members seem to be riding this application avalanche to basically bridge to a year where they can spend more. So saving a lot on outbound. Second takeaway is that getting in the room is paramount. Now, this is a really simple takeaway, but it was still really profound that outcomes for heads of UR and for programs seemed to get a lot better when the head of UR was an active participant in the conversation about efficiencies or cost cuttings, and the inverse was true as well. Outcomes seemed to be much worse and much less strategic when the head of UR wasn't involved in those conversations. Now, I know this is an obvious conclusion, but let me give you the subtler insight that we drew out of this, which is that sometimes mandates just happen. Like, we can't always know that they're coming. We can't always be in the room. That does just happen. But when we looked at those who weren't in the room and those who were, we did see a slight correlation, which was that those who were disproportionately in the room approached conversations about contractions with business goals in mind, as opposed to team protection goals. This is a subtle shift because I didn't talk to a single head of UR who didn't have some priority towards, or wasn't putting some priority towards preserving the team that they had, building the team that they had. But the finding was still very clear that those who were in the room were disproportionately willing to engage in and put on the table harder cuts that involved team members and involved programs they'd been building. Paradoxically, it seemed like that built trust with heads of TA and heads of HR to bring them into the room. And then consequentially, of course, that provided influence to actually be able to save teams, preserve roles later. Third takeaway, zero-based strategy. Very simple one. In accounting, there's a difference between incremental budgeting and zero-based budgeting. Very simple. Incremental, you just build from what you had the previous year, subtract or add. In zero-based, you build up from the ground every year. This year, we are seeing many more heads of UR shift over to a zero-based approach to budgeting and strategy. So instead of taking the school list that you had last year, the budget that you had last year, and then adding or subtracting, folks are starting from zero and then adding each school back one at a time, adding each line item back one at a time. What people have noted for us is that this has actually produced cost savings that they would have never expected to find that have had no negative impact on their efforts. I flagged this takeaway a minute ago. School contractions were the #1 source of savings that members found. I didn't talk to a single member who thought that they were engaging too few schools. Nearly every single member I talked to thought they were engaging too many. Almost every single one also took action on that and was consciously reducing the number of schools they had. If you're interested in running a session on school contractions, that's something 100% you could do with your strategy lead and with some of our data. Finally, programs. Programs were the cost beneath the surface. This might have been the largest or most surprising insight that I found. Programming spend doesn't always fall under the head of UR, but it is absolutely a part of the early careers apparatus. So we've seen some heads of UR argue that it should be included in the broader equation when thinking about efficiencies. And if that can happen, then we've seen members be able to save much more off of relatively inconsequential tweaks to programming than it would take them much larger changes to their UR recruiting efforts to hit that level of change. So programs might be a large category to try to add into the equation if we're dealing with some mandates.